Hello, and welcome to this week's Movie Math, where it seems that yes, Virginia, you can get uncancelled. What an incredible development for the industry. Because this weekend, Will Smith's career came roaring back to life with the huge debut of Bad Boys Ride or Die, with audiences of color deciding overwhelmingly to indeed ride with Smith. And I specify audiences of color because the white audience for Bad Boys did drop significantly. See, back in 2020, pre-slap, Bad Boys for Life's audience was 30% white. But for this new movie, post-slap, the white audience dropped by almost 50%. And here's where things get really interesting, because clearly the movie didn't need them. Even Black Panther's audience was 35% white, although interestingly, that sequel, Wakanda Forever's white audience, slipped to 20%. But these movies are still making bank, thanks not just to tremendous support from Black moviegoers, but also the growing Latino market. Sure, maybe if the slap hadn't happened, Ride or Die's opening would have been even more impressive, perhaps matching or surpassing the opening of Bad Boys for Life. Still, that movie came out over a holiday weekend, and also the 2024 box office overall has been underperforming. So Bad Boys Ride or Die looks fantastic. Bottom line, Bad Boys 4, a movie that, as you can see, didn't really connect with white audiences, still was able to match the debuts of Kung Fu Panda 4 and Planet of the Apes 4. A lot of fourth entries here. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And it topped the opening of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, a movie that had very little appeal to diverse audiences, particularly Black audiences. This transforms the industry. I cannot overemphasize this huge development. This is such a big deal. This is a really, really big deal. Not just for potentially canceled stars, but also for audiences of color. Because it changes the type of content that Hollywood will be making going forward. Because Hollywood, remember, is just making a product that they're selling to the audience out there. And there's clearly a huge market coming from audiences of color. They call it purchase power. And the purchase power of audiences of color is becoming even more powerful than it was before. As I've often discussed, audiences of color go to the movies more consistently than white audiences. White audiences, from what I've observed, will typically go maybe once or twice a month. But I think audiences of color are more often to go every weekend. So that's one of the reasons I think you've seen more diversity in movies. But this is a huge breakthrough. This is a huge breakthrough. And audiences of color saved Will Smith's career, and also directors Adil and Bilal. And these are the type of no matter how you feel about Will Smith, I think he's a very good businessman, and I think he will know this, he will notice this, and I hope Adil and Bilal will notice this as well, and you'll see that probably reflected in their upcoming projects. It's a really big deal. Also, the nostalgia play. We're going to talk about Will Smith a little bit more in a moment, but we're going to take a moment here just to talk about the nostalgia play not ending anytime soon. Look at the 2024 box office to date. We've got the second, fifth, fourth, and fourth entries in their respective franchises. And then Bad Boys 4 is now coming in hot. Music bios are also still hot as well. No wonder Lionsgate is super psyched about their Michael Jackson movie, which, hopefully that'll get very strong support across the board. But, there's the potential for audiences of color to supercharge that movie as well. Because Michael Jackson, that's interesting. Michael Jackson also was canceled. So that movie also kind of finds itself in a similar place. Although, of course, a much more serious situation than the Will Smith situation. But that movie just finished filming. And the only original idea that's doing pretty good this year is John Krasinski's If, which, what do you know, might just make it to the century mark domestic after all. Look at that thing. It's past 90 million. I can't believe it. It just kept chugging along. And also, I think, served, kind of as counter-programming. Garfield, another family film, is actually doing pretty well in addition. But I want to talk about Krasinski for a moment because this cements him as a very important creative for Paramount. His A Quiet Place franchise, also for the studio, by the way, continues to be huge for them, with the third installment in that franchise coming out later this month. And the first house, it was the first house announced for Universal's 2024 Halloween Horror Nights. Also, by the way, A Quiet Place, the third entry, also has its most diverse cast to date. Back to Bad Boys. The audience scores for the film are phenomenal. I love this movie. I told you in my review, it's really, really strong. And its box office is particularly impressive for an R-rated film. This franchise has also always done extremely well worldwide, and this latest installment seems to be no exception, proving that Smith is still a global movie star as well. Global. He still has that global pull, and that's one of the things that definitely makes a movie star. To his credit, though, he worked extremely hard to promote this film. So let's talk about that, because you can bet that other canceled talent is looking at Smith's game plan here closely. It involves making a really good movie. That's part of it. Bad Boys, as I said, is extremely strong. It's the bad boysiest of movies you can get. And I think, in a year or a time period where often things don't deliver on the promises they make, it's really exciting when a movie is as good as you would hope and want it to be. But also, let's talk about publicity, because the media certainly brought the slap up a lot, right? We talked about it. I mean, I think it's definitely part of the conversation, and I think it did affect the white audience. But Smith himself conducted himself as business as usual, didn't talk about it while doing a full court press, including a Hot Ones appearance, although Hot Ones didn't help Furiosa. But Smith's fans also made it super clear that they didn't want to hear about the slap either, with you guys slapping down any mention of it. And you showed up. Really, really impressive. And are there other canceled stars that you feel could make a similar comeback, right? Johnny Depp, a lot of support online, but he hasn't been able to do a comeback yet. He hasn't totally tried, right? I mean, I think his comeback would be another Pirates movie. So let's see if he can line one up. What about Jonathan Majors? I think at first he probably would have been in the same category to some degree as Smith. But then I think those Coretta Scott King and Michelle Obama comments probably derailed that. I'd be very curious to hear your thoughts on this. I would also say, who else would you put in the same category as Smith? I thought about it. I put Jonah Hill, Justin Timberlake, James Corden, and The Weeknd in this category of maybe being able to work their way back, right? You're not sure. Also, Ellen DeGeneres, would she be in this category as well? She's getting ready to try and win audiences back with a new Netflix comedy special later this year, which she says is her last one, but that might just be PR spin. It might be a situation where you decide whether or not it's her last comedy special if you tune in. What does this mean for Will Smith going forward? I think most likely, and again, I'm curious to hear your own thoughts down below, but I think this means that I Am Legend 2 gets fast-tracked, especially since Michael B. Jordan is being very supportive of Smith before he saw the opening weekend box office numbers. This headline was from a few days ago. That Michael B. Jordan, stand-up guy for Smith. It's important to note that Jordan had his own difficult time. Very different situation than Smith, obviously. He was never canceled. But he had a really horrible time at the Fantastic Four movie. I remember seeing him on the red carpet. He was understandably really, really going through the ringer, and it was affecting him. He had toxic fans harassing him left and right. Horrible. It's cut like The Acolyte now, like that, but for poor Michael B. Jordan, who, by the way, was fantastic in the film. And then the movie bombed, but thankfully he recovered thanks a lot to his very close relationship with Ryan Coogler. They came up together. But Michael B. Jordan ended up recovering spectacularly. And as soon as he and Ryan Coogler wrap up their vampire flick over at Warner Brothers, where that's one of the sweetest deals ever cut in Hollywood, I bet that Michael B. Jordan and Smith move ahead with that I Am Legend sequel. Jordan, by the way, is particularly supportive of talent of color. And the mission statement of his production company, Outlier Society, which has a deal with Amazon MGM, is to showcase diverse and bold talent, as well as diverse stories. Creed 3, made through that deal, big hit, fantastic movie. And that's important to note. It's really wonderful to be wanting to spotlight talent and stories of color, but it's only going to work in Hollywood if people pay to see that stuff. And they are. They are. And that, it was a little bit of a setback with the Color Purple movie. Well, I thought that was a great movie as well. I'm curious, although many of you felt it didn't need to be remade. But this is just, it's a new space at this level. And it's really interesting to see it develop. But I'm very curious to hear your thoughts, both for those of you inside and outside of the community. I Am Legend is also a Warner Brothers pick, by the way. And after this debut for Bad Boys Ride or Die, the suits at Warner Brothers should be pretty keen to get that sequel started. If I were Zazie, I'd be like, how fast can we get this going? Michael B. Jordan says they're still finessing the script, but I'd be like, I want it finessed so that as soon as Michael B. Jordan becomes available, we start filming. Because that's obviously one of Will Smith's most iconic roles. And he's been talking about it a lot on his press tour for Bad Boys Ride or Die. So back to Smith once again. Disney, what else can he do? Disney has been in a holding pattern on Aladdin 2. Could that now move forward again? The original film was Smith's first billion-dollar film. Fantastic movie. He ended up being a wonderful genie. And surely Sony would like to get Men in Black back on track. And I bet Smith would now be very open to that discussion as well. I think Smith's best play is to keep doing what he's doing. Go about business as usual and remind audiences why they fell in love with him in the first place with fan favorite franchises, of which he has many. He's already got an Oscar. He doesn't need to do original stories for now. I'd put that on hold unless it's a supporting role in someone else's project. I could see that maybe. What would you advise Will Smith now that he's got some momentum again? He's got an ember. How can we turn it in? Well, it's more than an ember with this kind of an opening, but how can we turn it back into a raging fire? Speaking of Chris Hemsworth, he's blowing on his flame. It's in danger of going out, man. I guess that's why he's like, let's throw some Transformers G.I. Joe on it. Because his non-Marvel career is looking bad. Furiosa tumbled another 60% in its third weekend. 60% the second weekend, 60% the third weekend. Usually the bleeding stops a little or slows a little. It fell all the way down to 6th place and is now very far behind Garfield, which it opened opposite against, as well as If. And while those are both family films, look at fellow R-rated movie Bad Boys Ride or Die, which pretty much matched Furiosa 3's entire domestic run in a single weekend. And Furiosa it's a prequel, but it's not an original idea. Horrible news for Anya Taylor-Joy and George Miller as well. The Mad Max franchise is going to have to take a very, 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 very long break if it ever comes back at all. And if it does come back, they're going to have to have made some significant changes. Like, I don't know, maybe putting Max. I think Max maybe does need to be the lead. And then as with Garfield, at almost $200 million worldwide at this point, the very inexpensive animated flick can hold its head high. But will this coming weekend's Inside Out 2 send the kitty cat packing to digital? Or will those anti-Disney audiences who are super aggressive try to send Disney a message by continuing to support that Sony film instead of this new Disney Pixar one? But I gotta say, pre-ticket sales for Inside Out 2 look really strong. It's Father's Day coming up this weekend. My family's going to go and see Inside Out 2. And, because of A-List, I'm doing the delicate dance of A-List. So I was like, should I pick up these Inside Out 2 tickets? Because I'm holding, what am I holding? I had to pay for Twister tickets because I'm holding A Quiet Place and Deadpool and Wolverine. Stop putting tickets on sale so far in advance. You're killing us with these reservation systems, the subscriptions. But I was like, do I need to get Inside Out 2 tickets? Because I wasn't quite sure when I wanted to go this weekend because, coordinating family stuff. And I was like, crap, these tickets are selling fast. So if you want to go this weekend, don't sleep on these tickets. I mean, most of the good tickets are almost gone, to be honest with you. So I think we might actually have our first 100 million opening of the year, or at the least something up there with Warner Brothers' Dune and Monsterverse around 80. But speaking of legacy, M. Night Shyamalan's did little for his daughter, whose new movie is disliked by critics and audiences. But $7 million, that's not a horrible debut. It's in the ballpark of other recent small horror films. Question is, what does that second weekend drop look like? As for the Shyamalan name, I don't think it helps that he's coming off some of his worst movies. I think he's really in bad shape with his career. But she still got to make a movie, right? And I think it's really, it's nobody's fault but her own that it apparently sucks. Maybe she should only capitalize on her dad's name and not his formula, which clearly is pretty stale and annoying at this point. And if you're wondering why Hollywood keeps re-releasing all these old movies, you see all these announcements about we're going to re-release this and re-release that. Well, look, the first 2 extended Lord of the Rings movies are back in theaters and they actually made the top 10. The third one has some showtimes tomorrow. These movies are 3.5. This fourth one, extended version, is 4 hours. Although I gotta say, I recently saw, as I told you, Young Frankenstein in theaters, and it was a delightful experience because the audience really wants to be there. They're excited to be there. Meanwhile, I saw If again this weekend with friends, and it was another horrific theatrical experience. Horrific! I honestly was sitting there half annoyed and half like, movie theaters and studios just got to fix this. This is really a problem. But have you seen any of these recent re-releases in theaters? Did you have as good a time as I did? And maybe now, even if you haven't seen any, you might be open to it. You might consider it. Particularly, again, if you have these subscription services, and it usually sometimes doesn't cost you anything extra. Over on streaming, starting with Nielsen for early May, Netflix won big with that roast of Tom Brady, 3 hours long, with all those beautiful minutes, which of course is how these, viewership is tallied, particularly by Nielsen. Did the GOAT just change the roast game? Usually the subjects of roast are having career difficulties, right? And are desperate for the cash and publicity. Tom Brady? Yeah, he got a lot of cash too, a ton of cash. But he's also trying to refresh himself, to pivot now that he's no longer on the field for good this time. And it seems to have worked. Who do you think would be a good celebrity to roast next, a la Tom Brady? It has to be somebody that you would never think would agree to it, but also someone who, like, it wouldn't be awful if they did. Like, I was thinking Jennifer Lopez maybe, but I just think that would be too mean, at least at the moment. So again, who would you recommend if you were at Netflix being like, how can we repeat this? Once again, though, it's mostly acquired talent on the overall chart, with only Tom Brady, Evil, love to see Mike Coulter, aka Luke Cage, winning, and Brooke Shields' Netflix movie representing original content. Interestingly, by the way, Evil aired on CBS its first season before moving to Paramount+. And as for its fourth season, which was just about to start after this chart. So this is viewers just getting ready for the fourth season of Evil. So I can't wait to see what those numbers look like when Nielsen catches up in the next week or so. But streaming services really need to get some new original content up there, because Fallout and Baby Reindeer have now both fallen off the overall chart. And again, since this is from a few weeks ago, on the originals chart, you can see Bridgerton back up here as fans get ready for that third season to debut. So that's kind of exciting to see, like the pre-excitement, the pre-show for some of this original content. With movies, there's Brooke Shields at a soft number 1 with Jerry Seinfeld's Unfrosted right behind it. Interestingly, Nielsen messed up last week's chart for movies and didn't include Unfrosted's numbers for its debut weekend. And this week's correct movie chart is only available on their website, which is why it looks differently formatted than the other one. And the trades actually ended up publishing the incorrect movies chart. Incompetence or suspicious? Well, I mean, when you look at Netflix's own charts, we already know from, because Netflix is much faster with their results, but we know that Unfrosted, it did okay. It didn't set the world on fire, but it wasn't a total dud either. But it is weird that Nielsen just kind of like skipped over it. But anyway, as for Netflix's charts for this past week, Atlas was still number 1, matching what it did its debut weekend in its first full week, which, it's okay. I mean, holding on to the top spot is a silver lining on the very dark cloud that currently hangs over Jennifer Lopez. It's bad, and getting worse, it seems. And you wouldn't think that it could, but it is. With shows, Bridgerton is still number 1 for the third week, while Benedict Cumberbatch was no match for a scandalous TikTok documentary. Oh, Dems to breaks. Meanwhile, Tires is struggling to find an audience, right? You know that, what's the other conservative comedian who looks like the drawing, right? He's not that guy, Matt Rolfe, I think, right? So it's a good thing that Shane Gillis already got a season 2 renewal, but you never know if they haven't started rolling cameras, although the show looks very inexpensive to make, but the numbers are so low that Netflix could change their mind. One might think that Netflix could maybe push Eric for awards season, but I think they're going to focus very heavily on Baby Reindeer, because I think that will help not only the image of the show, but maybe help it in court if it's seen as a prestige show, right? You want to keep everybody on the side of the show. It's almost out of the top 10 after 8 weeks, but that new lawsuit that was just filed will surely keep it in the news. Then on iTunes, Godzilla Minus One slipped a bit after its debut last weekend, perhaps because it's also available on Netflix. But if you look at Netflix's non-English movies chart, it didn't dominate there either, but it did do very well on social media. Still a big movie, but it's interesting. You would think these numbers would be a little bit bigger. It's still the usual suspects overall here on iTunes, recent theatrical releases, with the latest Strangers, Chapter 1 film joining the lineup. Also, with the announcement of a new Hunger Games movie late last week, the last installment jumped back into the top 10, a good sign for the franchise, especially because this installment had already done very well on digital when it was first released. As for this coming weekend, as I said, it's Father's Day here in the United States, so Disney Pixar is releasing the most un-Father's Day film they could think of, Inside Out 2. But again, as I said, it looks like it's going to be a huge hit, especially with the weekend all to itself. No other movies open this weekend. Meanwhile, though, on streaming, Netflix has an animated movie as well, Ultraman Rising. However, the big deal this week is shows. Oh boy! Not only does The Acolyte continue, can it trend #1 again on Tuesday night? But this is the big controversial episode. And I'm all ready to break it down. I have a theory about why it's not as bad as some of you are saying, and Anakin is still very special. All right, but on Thursday, there's part 2 of Bridgerton season 3 dropping and the first 3 episodes of The Boys season 4. Luckily, those are 2 very different audiences. Or do you watch both Bridgerton and The Boys? You're going to have a saucy Thursday. The review embargo for The Boys season 4, by the way, lifts Tuesday morning. It's so good. I can't wait to talk to you about it. Inside Out 2's review embargo lifts on Wednesday. I'll be continuing to break down The Acolyte as well as the new season of The Boys. And House of the Dragon, which drops 1 week from today on Father's Day itself. And the Tony Awards are next Sunday as well. I'm telling you about it now because since next Sunday is Father's Day, Movie Math next week will go up on Monday. However, I still will be breaking down House of the Dragon night of, with my breakdown going up after the episode airs. There's also the new Apple TV show Presumed Innocent, with Jake Gyllenhaal taking on the Harrison Ford role from the 1990 movie. Interestingly, I recently watched the 1990 movie because Jeffrey Wright, that was his first movie role. Blink and you miss him. He's there, though. So I wanted to check out the film. I wish he had a bigger role, but I actually really enjoyed Presumed Innocent. I thought it was a very strong, interesting movie. Now, I liked the series' take on Fatal Attraction from a couple of months ago, or was that a year ago? But nobody ended up watching that show or talking about it. And I think it got canceled. And this just kind of seems like the exact same thing. So as much as I love Joshua Jackson and Jake Gyllenhaal, and I love them a lot, and they're really the only reasons I suspect to watch these shows, you really should just go watch the original movies on which they're based. All right, and that's this week's Movie Math. What have you been watching, and what do you plan to watch? Also, what do you think of Will Smith's new lease on his career? And as I said, the purchase power, and that leads to overall power of audiences of color, and therefore talent of color in Hollywood. Oh, the game, it is evolving. All right, share those stats down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.